My name is Era, and I'm the host of the Tamil Creator Podcast. I chat with creators from all over the world to share their stories and discuss hot topics in a way that I hope inspires, educates, and entertains you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Tamil Creator. This is your host, Era. Today, I have an awesome guest, for you guys to kind of listen to. His name is Rajeswaran. How I actually first got connected with him was he reached out. I think it was like a cold email or like through like our inquiry page to kind of talk about or share his story about kind of how he came from Sri Lanka and kind of where he's at in terms of at that point in London, UK. And for me, just hearing that story is remarkable. I'm not going to do it justice by summarizing it, so I'll let him tell it. But Robert is, a serial entrepreneur. He's, started a few companies in the UK, and now he's currently in beautiful Singapore while we're kind of all in the cold here in Canada and or the UK, wherever you guys are at. And, I'm jealous of not just the weather, but Robert's six pack, which he's constantly showing off. So I'll let him kind of talk about that as well. And yeah, just kind of, for Robert to kind of share some of his kind of insights in daily life in Singapore, which is, quite fascinating because it's kind of quite different from kind of what the West is experiencing in terms of how Singapore has managed COVID. But before I kind of blab on, let the man Robert himself, introduce himself, talk about his entrepreneurial journey, and kick things off.
Hello. Thanks for having me. This is awesome. Thank you so much for the invite. Really excited to kind of have this chat. It's probably more like the chat we have, but it's just recorded,
Yes.
Which is fun. So thank you so much for having me again. Love to like dive more into like what I'm doing here in Singapore. Love to find out a bit more about like what you're up to, and we'll kick things off.
Perfect. Yeah. Why don't we start off with like the basics? Like, when you reached out to me, when at tamilculture.com, and you kind of mentioned some of your story, maybe talk about that. Like, how did you grow up? How did you make your way to kind of the UK? And just talk about that first part of your journey.
Sure. I think one of the reasons I reached out to you, I think this is going back about like 5 years ago. It's really to like really share, like, I think it's a story that I have, and it was my story of coming from leaving Jaffna and then moving to London, and like that long, like year and a half of journey. But like, it's also a very similar story to a lot of other kids who were born in Jaffna at that time and going through that civil war. So I was born in Jaffna in 1991. Life was okay, but because I was a kid, you don't really realize that you're in the middle of a war zone, right? So in 95 is when things really like took a turn. The army like invaded like Jaffna, and meaning that they were just taking over, and we all had to leave. So this is like, Jaffna is like one of the largest Tamil cities in Sri Lanka, and 500,000 people were living there at that point. And we were all pretty much like forced to flee, leave everything behind. So I remember like on that day, there was like tuk-tuks going around Jaffna just announcing that the rebels were announcing that they could no longer hold off the army, and you're asked to leave and go and find some safety. So like my mom, like it was me, my mom who was pregnant at that time, and my dad who's gone out at that point. So we literally just grabbed like bags of food, any money we've had, and any gold we've had, packed those stuff, and it's just a long walk. And along the way we found like my dad, because like he was driving at that point, he couldn't really move, because if you can imagine like 500,000 people trying to move out, we dump our car there, and we're like on this long walk from Jaffna to Klinochi. Klinochi was at that point, like it was even now, like it's pretty much a jungle. At that time it was pretty much like a jungle that we all were trying to move to safety. And like there was one point, even when I went back to like Sri Lanka, like more recently, every time I go, I always go past like Navakuli Bridge, which is like this huge, not even that huge, but like it's a bridge that everyone had to cross over. And that's one of the last few memories I have of like leaving Jaffna. So we moved there and then stayed in Klinochi for like 6 months. And my brother was born there, and then from there we moved to Colombo. And from Colombo, we were just, we lived in a lodge. So I think some people might know what that is, but a lodge is essentially like a temporary accommodation. And there was a lot of other Tamil refugees from the north and east who were staying there temporarily. It is not like my time there was like absolutely crazy because you've got like hundreds of people, and we've had like the tiniest room to share between the four of us. And I would still go to school in the morning, but like whenever any of my friends in school asked me where I stayed, I couldn't tell them because I was a little bit like embarrassed. I didn't really have a home. And at night times it would like pretty scary because like it's when the police will come and raid you looking for rebels in these places, and all the young men have to go and hide. So like all these crazy stories really like bred me for life. I think it's to really appreciate um, more the freedom that and more the freedom and the privileges that I have now. So we left Colombo like late 90s, early 2000s, and then to go from Sri Lanka to the UK is not as straightforward as getting a visa and a flight and you're there in Heathrow. It doesn't work like that, right? Especially for refugees. So we've had to take more of an illegal or an unconventional route, I shall say. So we went from Sri Lanka to Indonesia. In Indonesia, we ended up staying for a year, trying to figure out a way out. And then from Indonesia to Thailand, then to China, and then from China to Finland. And in Finland, when we arrived there, they figured that we were on illegal documents and that we were refugees. So then the Finnish authorities put us in refugee camps in the north of Finland. We were there for 6 months. Again, another interesting journey because that's when I met other refugees. So people from Somalia, Kosovo, Albania, loads of different other parts of the world. And from there, we managed to escape the refugee camp and then got onto a plane to London. And that whole journey took about like 18 months or more. Didn't really have a chance to go to school at that point. It was pretty much what my mom knew, and she was just teaching us things along the way. And then getting to the UK was just like challenge number one. You're there now, but now you're trying to integrate into the society, learn English, like start going to school and start to try and have a normal life again. And that took a lot of time and strength and really understanding. Reflecting back now, I think it's crazy for a child to go through something like that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's not just me, but like a lot of Tamil kids go through that phase. And that's probably why I'm like super proud of our community, because we go through these challenges all the time and we always thrive from it. So that's how I go to London.
That's crazy. By the way, are you okay with me sharing that whole kind of journey? Like
Yeah. I mean, it's fine. It's completely. I'm sure most people will know these stories. I have even more crazy stories.
Oh no, I mean in terms of like,
Yeah.
how you got to the UK. Is that like
Oh
public
yeah,
knowledge?
yeah.
Oh,
No.
okay, okay.
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah, yeah. That's
Okay.
all good. That's all
Just
good.
want to make sure. Uh
People know I used fake passwords to get to the UK.
yeah,
It's
I
all good.
think I think kind of the journey you described, I think is probably one even who knows, like I'm sure like a lot of families like like I think from us coming there to Canada, you go through
Yeah,
like several routes. I think we had to go to the US. I'm not even sure.
yeah,
But yeah, we landed as definitely refugees in Canada.
yeah.
So the thing is, I guess I have a different memory than yours because I was probably like 2 or 3 when we
Mm.
arrived. So I lived through it, but I have absolutely no memory. And as a child that young, you probably have no comprehension. Similar, like you were like I think you were 12 or 13 at that time, right?
I think much when I moved to, yeah, no, I'm much younger, like 8 or 9 actually.
But you still have
Yeah,
some level of
yeah,
comprehension of what's going
yeah,
on. You might
yeah,
not know all
yeah,
the details of why you're leaving or some idea, but
yeah.
it's I think from like my perspective was like way different than yours. So I can't even imagine that. Like I haven't even gone back to visit and I want to, but you know,
Yeah, yeah.
that's like a conversation for later,
For now.
for another time. But yeah, so you kind of got to London. You went through this crazy journey as like you said 7, maybe at that point you're like 10 or 11, and now your family is in a new country. where English probably isn't your first language, or maybe you kind of, I know there's some English taught in Sri Lanka, but talk
Yeah,
about kind of that whole culture and language, transition, because it's not an easy one. Like that's one reason why I admire refugees from anywhere in the world, because I picture myself going to like say Japan and then picturing that I lived there and I have to like learn fluent enough Japanese so I can kind of actually live a life there. That's kind of what our
yeah,
parents
yeah,
did,
yeah.
and like yourself, you did to set up a life. It's crazy.
I think, yeah, learning the language is it's a tough one, but yeah, like because the thing is, I never really went. I didn't have that many years of school in Sri Lanka. It
Yeah,
was very like like we were moving quite a lot, and there's
yeah,
just it's a very like childhood was very chaotic. So it was pretty much what mom and dad knew, and they were like just teaching us like words that they knew. So even when they arrived, like they didn't really know like how to form sentences. They can get their way, like get around and stuff. But going to school was tricky because like you're one of the few Tamil kids there. But luckily when I arrived, there was already a few kids in that school, so we normally get like paired up with one of them, and they kind of, because they speak Tamil as well, and they like show you way around. You feel a little bit more included. But I can imagine for kids who are in like totally like white areas, for example, in different parts of the UK where you're the only brown kid, and that
yeah,
could get really difficult. So
yeah,
luckily, in my scenario, was a little bit easier because I grew up in Wembley, and Wembley has like a pretty large Tamil community. Um, but learning English would struggle because I only knew a few words, and learning the structure of like forming sentences. I remember like when I the first time on the playground, I was the only thing I knew was like, what is your name and how old are you? Like these are things they teach you back home, right?
yeah.
And those are the only things I knew. And that was like, it took me a while to start having better conversations and start making friends. But also like, I think one of the things that I've started working on a lot more like recently, opposed to before, is like when we come from like war zones and like in countries where things have been a little bit rough, I think kids do get affected quite a lot in terms of like confidence levels and a lot of things that's going on. I don't think I couldn't address it because I was too young. My parents obviously didn't understand it because it's not something we speak about in the community so much. But thinking back now, I think I should have maybe looked at the way things were a little bit more different. But I think that's one of the things I struggled with in the beginning, is like just clashing of culture, and you're in a state of shock because you're in a new country. That was definitely a little bit of struggle, the language and just settling in. But things did get better over time.
Interesting. Yeah, that transition must have been hard. I mean, this episode is sponsored by nobody. That's right, nobody. So if you could be kind enough to hit that subscribe button, that would mean a lot to me. You kind of you had this like very, I mean, I know it's common for a lot of kids that kind of came from Sri Lanka during that time, but you transitioned to London, UK, and then, you became an entrepreneur. But as you know, the story with most entrepreneurs, the business they first started wasn't their first hustle. And you kind of
Yeah,
mentioned
yeah.
in your article before about kind of your story
Mm.
that you started off as your first hustle. I think it was doing like translation work or something, or translating stuff for other kids, I think. So tell us about
Yeah, I think.
some of your first baby hustles.
Oh, like so one of the things I used to do when I was a kid. So I was one of the first kids to get like computers because I started playing around with computers back home, like in Colombo. So I was like that's one of the first things I bought when I first like moved to the UK. So got one of those and started getting, like, we had dial-up internet back then, so we started getting on those, like listening to music, downloading music. So I used to download music, burn them, and sell them off in school. I think that was my first hustle. And then I used to like help other people in like my community, like set up internet at homes, to go around, fix their computers, set up internet. And then because once I started picking up a bit of like English, then I used to get loads of people like come to my house that would ask me to like fill up forms for them, passport forms, read letters, translate. So that was quite an interesting like experience, thinking back now. Like I used to go with people to like maybe some, like a few times I went to court because they had refugee status case come up in court. I used to go with them to help them translate.
You got paid to do
Used to help
this?
you. Sometimes it was
Okay.
more like I buy you a meal, and like
Okay. Okay.
it's more a community thing. So it's to do that. Um, and then the first real thing I started experimenting was like when I worked in banking straight out of uni, and then worked at a fintech startup, and that's when I started meeting a lot more entrepreneurs, like people who are like actually like real entrepreneurs who are actually building businesses. And that was my job. I was in sales, so my job to like speak to founders every day. Like I was so inspired by some of these stories, and I was pretty young back then as well. And you're like, you're young and naive, and you think you can do anything. And I was like pretty inspired. And then I started working on like little projects with other people I knew on the side. Um, Started put together. I think the first one was a little um, like a recruitment platform, trying to connect recruiters and companies. I did that. Another easy one, then that went on to Go Code, which was a little side project. I was just curious as to the tech world and the technology, education, and the digital gap. And then went on to building and running a kids coding school for 4 years. So that was a lot of fun. And then small like hobbies were like Airbnb projects. Like I like one day, like I think sometimes like when you're an entrepreneur, you've got, it's so hard to sleep at night because you're always buzzing with ideas. So one day I thought, like I came across Airbnb, and I was flying out anyway, and I had my apartment, and I thought I'll just list my property on Airbnb to see what happens. And then I ended up waking up the next morning with like a shit ton of bookings. And then yeah, that kind of that hobby it became an addiction, because it's like, oh, I can just rent this out, get paid. Like that hustle was so exciting. And then I started doing that for multiple different properties, which I did up until COVID, when it completely crashed. I did a lot of that. And then I used to help my parents. My parents have a sari shop in Wembley. So I used to do, like, I used to help them with all the imports, dealing with all the customs, and like, helping them on strategy. Because that was fun, because like it's really taking, um, it's really looking at a very traditional like business with a different angle, and I used to come up with ideas. That was a lot of fun. And then I've been involved in things like Young Enterprise, which is a UK charity that helps school kids come up with ideas. So I used to do like a bunch of those. So it's always been around like testing, coming up with ideas, validating them, and to see if there's a business model around things. So much fun.
Oh yeah, it sounds like your time in London was pretty productive and kind of gave you kind of that foundation to kind of, take that next step. Like you went from Sri Lanka, you went to London, and then, I guess you said, you know what, London's too boring. I've been here too long. And then you made that, journey to Singapore. So tell us about, there's a great article, which, I'll link to kind of the notes here as well, talking more about it, but I'll let Robert talk about, why you decided to make that shift from London to Singapore.
I think the main reason is because, one, I've been in London for a while, and working and living abroad was something I've always wanted to do. But it's not always easy when you have your own business. Not easy to just like move. So I was looking. I came to Singapore about 2 years ago, because I was traveling, and I was in Malaysia. Then took a bus to Singapore, and I was here just for a couple of days before I flew back. And like I just saw the potential in it, in terms of like opportunities in the tech and the startup ecosystem. The government's very bullish about it, and they're really trying to build that ecosystem, trying to build Singapore as the startup hub. And in some ways it is, because a lot of the APAC startups, some are built here, but a lot of them do end up moving here for like funding, fundraising, and growing. And I saw Singapore as uh, a potential ground for like coming up with ideas, testing it on a small scale, because of the size of the island and the population. There's a small market that you can test out. Once you validate it and test it, you can raise funding to kind of expand into the bigger markets. So that was one aspect. I saw that as a true like opportunity. The second thing is there's a lot of APAC kind of like headquarters here, whether that be tech companies, whether that be like banks or financial institutions. It's a hub for Asia, and that puts us in a very kind of good kind of spot. And also like the links, it's well connected to all parts of the world. It's easy to fly in and out of Singapore. Those are the professional reasons as to why I moved. The more personal reason is because one, I want to be more closer to home. I want to, like, my grandma still lives in Jaffna. I still have cousins there. I saw the potential of trying to go back more often, be more connected to roots. And also here locally, like Tamil is one of the national languages here. There's a thriving community of Tamil people here. So it's always good to be. I feel like it's got the standards of a Western developed country, but still has the roots which I'm connected to. So that's probably why I was more inclined to move.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind I've been to Singapore once for like about 4 or 5 days before we went to Bali, and I think people know Singapore. It's like super clean.
Yeah,
Um, the other cool thing I found about it is when we went to like different food spots. I think we went to, I don't know if they call it Little Jaffna there, but like I just remember like I went to this particular area. I think it was like I saw
yeah,
Tamil
little, yeah,
signs.
yeah,
What
yeah,
do they call it there?
Little India,
Oh, Little India, yeah. So
Little
like,
India.
it was cool for me to kind of see Tamil signs and like people here, speaking Tamil. I feel like the Tamil there was a bit different than I think Jaffna Tamil. I think it was like
Yeah,
faster or
yeah,
something. There's
yeah,
something
yeah,
different about it. But it was just cool. Like you said, it's like a modern, beautiful city. Like we're staying at like a pretty good hotel. Like it's like completely modern, huge skyscrapers. But then, you kind of go to this bustling like area that just reminds you of like home, right? So.
yeah, yeah,
I thought that
yeah.
was really
I think
cool.
for me, like some of the things I notice like on a daily basis is like I get on the metro, the train to like work every morning. All the announcements are in Tamil.
Yeah.
The signs are all in Tamil. The road signs, all the documents, and it's well represented.
Yeah.
And it's so cool to have that in a very like modern, developed country. And I always feel like, like if the whole war thing never happened, like I think like the north and east could have been as well developed as Singapore. So
Mm.
that's the way I see it. So that's why it's actually quite cool, and like it's easy for me to like adapt into the culture here and being part of the community.
Got it. So yeah, I mean, we'll kind of get to focus on the business part of it. Like you went to Singapore, and I know you did like a startup competition. You
Yeah,
guys won that, and then kind of, maybe it took a little bit of time, but I saw that now you're kind of working on something called Boxaroo, and maybe you want to tell the
yeah,
people how that idea came to kind of fruition, how the team came together, and maybe like how
sure, sure.
what your business model is like as well.
Sure, sure. So when I moved to Singapore, like literally was exploring a bunch of ideas, came here on an entrepreneur visa, so I had a bit more freedom and flexibility to test out ideas. The first thing, and then immediately 2 weeks after I landed, we went into a lockdown. So all the plans I had of networking and trying to get things going like was a no-no. So you got to adapt really quickly. So I took part in like a virtual startup week in Singapore and met a couple of people there and formed an idea. That was around like mental health app, um, and that I ended up winning it, and we've got some like exposure from it, connected to a bunch of people. But unfortunately, that didn't go too far because the team wasn't the right fit. And then I met my co-founder here during the lockdown, so we used to live together, and he's been working in tech for a while and worked on some branding projects for companies, and I've done that in the UK as well. And we came up with the Boxaroo because we had a housemate who was receiving a lot of merchandise from Goldman Sachs, where he used to work. And we were just curious as to where this is coming from, and we wanted to kind of explore this idea. And the idea is simple: like companies around the world order branded merchandise all the time. They call it swag, and whether that be hoodies, t-shirts, notebook, pens. We even done things like fully customized chocolates for a lot of companies. And the industry is so big, but it's very fragmented and old. It's still very much like you got to find suppliers, call them, email them, and It's a very old school way of doing things. There's no streamlined process. There's no platform that allows you to customize. And there was no real good experience on quality as well. So we took a lot of this and we just started speaking to more and more people who order. People who order these things are like generally HR people, office admins, partner marketing people. So we found out who's ordering these stuff and started speaking to them and trying to understand the pain point. And the pain point was pretty simple. Back and forth on email, no assurance on quality, and most of the printers didn't care about the branding.
Sorry,
So we
Robert.
took all of them.
There's
Yeah.
like a there's like a bird that keeps like is that a bird that keeps like
Okay, let me move. I think this is welcome to Singapore. It's just it's what happens here. Let me move inside.
yeah. Did you know that every time you left a 5 out of 5 review for this podcast, a Tamil parent lets their child pursue a career in the creative arts? Okay, that's probably not true, but if there's a chance that it is, do you really want to jinx it? Leave a review. Do it for the young creative in you. It was okay until the bird kept doing it like every 3 seconds, and I was like, all right, I don't know if this is gonna work.
All right. So
Perfect.
yeah,
Yeah.
so we found that, and then we started testing it out. Built a very basic platform that allows people to go on there, pick products which are curated by us and checked for quality, upload your logo, design it, click a few buttons, and you can have your merchandise delivered to your door in 2 weeks. And that was like unheard of in this part of the world, and also in Europe. So we started doing that and launched last year. We launched around September time, and literally targeted the companies we want to work for. Now, like we were so specific on who we wanted to work with and who would actually follow. So we started targeting the largest companies here. So we work with people like LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Grab, which is like Uber here. We also do a bunch of like projects for like the government agencies, and we were very specific on going for the big boys because we felt like that's where the volume was and that's where the revenue was going to come in, and you get a lot of traction out of that. And the smaller companies generally follow. The smaller companies generally order directly on the site. So since then, like it's been a lot of fun here. You know, for me personally, like moving to a new country, setting something up, and then doing sales in a foreign country was a challenge, and I was looking for a challenge for a long time. So that's been a lot of fun to do. My co-founder generally works on all the product stuff. Like he's amazing at like design, branding, strategy. He takes care of all of that. And then we have a bunch of developers around the world who works on the site and on developing the site further. And then printing partners and suppliers around the world. So it's a business which has loads of different pieces, and we kind of bring that together and keep it running.
So it's almost like swag as a service is what you're selling.
Correct. Yes.
Um, so in terms of like your business model, like how do you make money? Is it there's some kind of subscription? Is there like a profit on each piece that you do? Like what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, we do a bunch of things, right? We have about 200 products on our site. So anything from t-shirts to like chargers, hoodies, pens, notebook. So we have those, and people can go and order. I think the minimum order quantity is about 30 pieces, so it's still pretty low, and we make a decent profit on each item people order. The second thing we do boxes. So like new hire boxes or work from home boxes or partner appreciation boxes. So these are like actually fully branded boxes that we put merchandise like swag inside, and we ship them out to companies as well. So the shipping and storage came as a result of the pandemic. So a lot of people aren't going into their office anymore. They're working from home. So people couldn't, or like the companies didn't want to order anything into their office. They asked us to just ship them out, and we just charge a fee for that. Second thing is a lot of companies have now gone completely virtual, meaning that they don't have office space to store these things. They were like, hey, can you just produce them, store them, and ship them out? And we were like, okay, we can do that. So we have a lot of warehouse partners we work with and shipping partners. So we take care of the whole process from production to storing and shipping.
So it's really simple for anybody, like any of these companies looking to tackle this problem, which is, like you said, instead of making calls to like different, swag partners or different kinds of manufacturers or whatever it is of those products, they go to your site in a couple of clicks. It's like right out of the, like, it's like you put in the logo, you select the item, put the address in, and it gets sent off. It's that
Yeah,
easy.
exactly. It's super easy. And for like generally in a lot of the large organizations, they would have two or three people that do exactly this. Now, this is the huge kind of cost saving for them and also makes a lot of like, saves a lot of time and money for a lot of people. And then on top of more than just like logos, like generally a lot of companies just stick logos on products and that can get super boring. So what we encourage like brands to do is really use their like brand logos, their colors, and their story, most importantly, to come up with merchandise that really vibes with their brand and what they're trying to say. So, for example, like we've done things like new mothers like baby kits. So you've got like bibs, swaddle, like hats, things for like newborns, right? That is part of new parents and companies to give out. We've also done like sales teams, like championships for a lot of tech companies. So we usually get a couple of thousand budget for like 9 winners every 6 months, and we do experiences as well. So we've had someone ask us, hey, can you like as a prize, can you get one of like a celebrity to say a message for this person? Or we've done things like customized chocolates for companies, so with their branding on it. So there's a lot of cool stuff we do as well as some of the box standard stuff too.
That's really super interesting. Yeah, because I would have never, like, from what I know about Boxaroo, I would have never thought that you guys do like storage and like shipping. Like you would
Yeah,
not, like all these opportunities that kind of existed post COVID, never, I guess it was never part of the plan, I guess, right? Like in terms of, you know, to like you said, companies that are completely virtual, to kind of ship a branded box with kind of swag welcoming that
yeah,
employee.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
super
yeah.
fascinating. You
It's a
talked,
lot like there's a lot of it's a lot of work for companies, and that's why it makes it a lot easier because not everyone's going to have the time, money, and the resources to do everything, and that's where we kind of come in. And sometimes we do like one-off projects, sometimes the yearly like contract. So that's why it's a like that's why the pandemic's created some opportunities for us.
yeah, it's just interesting. I guess unless you kind of have some kind of industry knowledge about the specific problem, you
You'd
never know that
never
there's
get
like a legitimate business out of this. So it's pretty cool.
exactly.
You talked about sales at the beginning where you kind of focus on a specific list of big companies that you want to go after.
Yeah,
That's easier said than done, saying I want to get Grab, which is the Uber of kind of Asia, or LinkedIn or Twitter. It's another thing to actually close them. So what was
yeah.
your process like to kind of, hit these, how to kind of close these deals?
I think it's I think step one is understanding your like it's really coming up with market segmentations, as in breaking down your target audience into chunks, putting them in different buckets, tech startups, like large tech companies and MNCs, and then really breaking them down and understanding their needs. Like each company, the requirements that a startup has for merchandise is not the same as what a larger tech company would have, even though the culture might be very similar. The smaller tech startup is trying to mirror what the larger tech companies are doing, but the potential revenue and like their needs are very different, and the people who are ordering within these companies are different. So it's really starting to understand who's going to be ordering and where your revenue is going to come from. Next step is within these organizations, who are the people that's ordering? Again, that takes some time for you to figure out. That takes some time for you to, speak to a lot of people, like message, call, email, all that like hard work, like all that groundwork we put in to really understand it. And then you come up with, okay, I understand who's ordering, I understand who I want to go for. Let's make a list of people or a list of companies that I definitely want to have in my portfolio. And then it's just really hustling it out in the sense that you are trying everything, like you're trying everything possible in terms of like just messaging, emailing, or you're asking for introductions from people. I've done a bunch of courses on like LinkedIn to really help me get up to speed with that stuff. One of the things that's changed massively from my last sales role was like, there's you can't no there's not a lot of like cold calling opportunities anymore. There's because people are working from home. There's not a lot of like cold emailing anymore because of like restrictions with email providers. If you spam people, you will get like blocked, right? So there's a lot of restrictions, so which means that now you've got to be very specific, and your messaging had to be targeted to kind of really get those output. So I do a lot of that LinkedIn hard work, constantly posting, constantly reaching out to people. The second part is more the networking and getting out there and ask for introductions. That really helps as well. Naturally, I've had a good network of people in the tech space, so I've had introductions come through as well. But it doesn't always have to come from work. Like you could place yourself in places where these people hang out and make like then you build a network of people that would make introductions for you. So that part was quite interesting. What you're essentially doing is like building brand ambassadors for you. You're getting people like, once you sell to a customer, you're now, this customer is becoming your ambassador. They will pass you on to more people, so make introductions. That's the way I approached it. It's I can get into a lot more details, but that's a general idea of how things are done.
No, I just wanted to break it down for people because, like, for myself, I do a lot of sales, business development, and I think, especially if you want to start something on your own, even if you hand it off to somebody else later on, anytime you do a startup, you're always the first salesperson. If you can't sell the product or
100%.
service, you can't teach somebody else or give them the secrets or, the finer points to kind of, scale your sales effort. So I just wanted to kind of break that down. So that was
Yeah,
excellent.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Money can be hard to come by, but here's a $100 opportunity for you. Join my free newsletter for free exclusive content and a free chance to win $100 when I hold special draws. Did I mention that it's free? In terms of Boxer as well, you kind of highlighted some of the challenges, which are, cold calling and cold emailing were different. It's difficult. It used to be very
Yeah.
possible. Um, how about on the funding side, or like, I guess the revenue side? Did you decide to kind of bootstrap, or, did you guys fundraise, or do you have a goal to fundraise in the future?
We definitely have a goal to fundraise. At the moment, it's been completely bootstrapped because it's a profit making business, and it's the industry we're operating is pretty straightforward, right? We've got merchandise that we create, we sell on, and we make a profit straight away. There's no long term. You don't need to wait around for to a guy's set of customers to really make a lot of revenue. So that, which has been quite the positive thing, because we can get things up and running a lot more faster. Huge in terms of motivation, because like, yeah, close this deal, I know exactly how much I make from it, let's use that to keep going and building more of that revenue. So that's where like that's why we've been bootstrapped. Like from day one, we were like, we don't need anything, we're not trying to do anything super sexy. It's a very simple business, but we've made it a lot more fun and interesting for brands. So we've been bootstrapped and really hustled our way to get to where we are, where we're not, we're profit making, and we're continuing to grow. Where we will like look for funding is that next step, like when we are looking for expansions to other parts of Asia. We also have a lot of cool ideas around integrations. I think that's where it will make sense. To give you an example, I think what we'll ideally like to do is to look at ways how we can integrate into other CRM systems. So if you're a salesperson, you're working on a lead, and you want to send out a little like merchandise or a gift to your prospect, all you need to do is like click a button on your Salesforce or HubSpot. We get a notification on our end, and we can ship that out. The other thing is maybe looking at like HR systems. So when you're onboarding new employees, we can plug into your system. As soon as someone new is joining, we can automatically send them out a new hire kit. So those are like some of the cooler stuff we want to work on. but we want to get to a much more stable position before we start fundraising and go to that next phase.
That's super cool. I never thought of that in terms of like if you're a button on Salesforce or HubSpot or like you said, one of these HR solutions, that's great. That's like then you're kind of like I don't know what to like I'm trying to think of another example, but that's like so powerful. Like they don't have to
Yeah,
like go anywhere else. It's like just embedded in their normal workflow and daily process. That's crazy.
exactly.
Hopefully you guys get there. I'm sure you will. What do you see like Boxaroo, getting to in the next 3, 5 years? You kind of mentioned the integration, which is awesome, but from like a company point of view, do you have like targets for like revenue or, reach or like customers? Like, yeah, what are those goals that you have?
I think our next kind of 2 to 3 year plan is to really expand in the APAC region. But that's not to say like we already do a lot of work in the APAC region, I because Singapore is a hub for APAC, right? So we send a lot of stuff out of Singapore to Australia, New Zealand, Japan. So we do a lot of work that way. We also get a lot of requests like from the UK. So UK companies with an APAC office here, they were like, hey, we've got an APAC team. Can you print and send out merchandise to our team? So we already do a lot of work internationally, but we want to start, having different hubs around APAC. I think that will be our next step. And then, doing more cooler things with integrations. I think that is going to be quite a big one for us. We're actively hiring at the moment to take on more people. So, that's our plan, is to keep growing to get to a stage where we can really expand.
What is your like, it sounds like you have a lot on your plate. Like, what does your day look like when you kind of wake up to like
I,
when you go to bed?
I think it's more like, for me, getting up in the morning, getting my workouts done, then, pretty much in the office from 8 till about 7. And then it's most of the time is spent on like customers, like speaking to customers, answering questions, creating, like coming out with ideas. But also half of my time is then spent on hunting for new business. So reaching out to people, meeting people, having coffees. Um, and then in the evenings, then I work on more of the overall like business side of things. So helping out like my co-founder Nikhil on his parts, chipping in on ideas, coming up with like helping on products, coming up with new products. So all of that stuff is done in the evenings or on the weekends. So it's generally a full packed week. Like by the time it comes to like Sunday, I'm like dead.
So I mean, what do you do outside of work for fun?
I actually quite a bit of stuff. I think it's having like good work-life balance is something that I neglected for a long time in my previous startup. And that's something I didn't want to do in this one, even though um, things get like super busy and stuff. I try and carve out time to like hang out with friends. Or in Singapore, we're very fortunate to have a beach that's only like 15, 20 minutes away. So we go and do those, or water activities, hang out with friends for drinks and dinners. We do a lot of barbecues here as well. So everything that I couldn't really do in the UK because of the weather constraints, I try and do that a lot here.
Interesting. So I mean, uh, I don't think we kind of touched on this at the beginning, but you talked about socializing and all that, and you're in Singapore, which I feel like, based on your description of it, has handled COVID very well, unlike kind of what I've seen maybe like other countries do. Um, so maybe can you talk about, what's it like with kind of living in Singapore during COVID? How has it impacted you kind of from a personal and professional point of view?
I think Singapore obviously handled this like a lot better. Like I think when I first moved, after like second week of me being here in March, we went into a national lockdown. So this was last year, right? For from March till June, for good 2.5, 3 months, there was no interaction with anybody, and I think that was like the hardest part. You weren't allowed to meet anyone. You're only allowed to go out for shopping and exercise, and masks were compulsory from last year. So that what that was like that freaked me out a little bit. I'm like, I'm in a new country now. I feel locked, and I can't really do anything or speak to anyone or meet anyone. And that was the hardest time. And being away from family, not being able to socialize. And I'm generally a very sociable person, so being constrained, that was hard. But from June onwards, it's been a gradual kind of um, opening up of things. So from June, we were allowed to meet 5 people. Restaurants opened, restaurants and bars opened up, and then all the activities started opening up as well. So then I've been able to kind of get out and do things, meet friends. And from December onwards, we're now allowed to meet 8 people. So from like end of December till now, you can have after gatherings of 8 people. More places have opened up, and offices have started or like opened up as well and increased their capacity on how many people can be at the office. So there's a lot more people going back into work. Economy is starting to pick up a lot more. Um, so in terms of the COVID situation, it's been okay, been able to manage. I think, but my biggest struggle is like not being able to see my family for over a year, and like it's hard because I like we speak to my parents almost every other day and like stay in touch. But it's hard because like they really miss me and they want to see me and I want to go home. We can't because the UK has done a terrible job at managing this. If I do go back to the UK, I have to quarantine in a hotel for like 2 weeks. Then when I come back to Singapore, for which I need to get permission, I'll have to quarantine again. So you're spending a lot of time in a hotel room, and then you're also paying as well. So that's something I don't want to do. So I'm going to hold off till I can go back. But that's been the hardest part, just being away from friends and family that I have in the UK. On a more positive note, just like being here for a year, I've obviously made a lot of friends here, which I spend a lot of time with. The community here is pretty nice, very supportive. It's small, but everyone knows everyone. Um, that's been quite nice, and people are generally like they want to hang out. They're always up for like adventures and doing things together, which I really enjoy doing.
Seems like, I guess, based on everything you're describing, if people want to look to the future and kind of see it like right now, like what could life look like if things were managed well, or like
Yeah,
once there's a
yeah.
vaccine, just look to you in like Singapore. One of the questions I guess I'm more curious about is, there's a kind of a lot of, I guess, commentary on the death of the office. Do you see this happening in Singapore or no?
uh I've seen this happen, like from a couple of companies have completely gone virtual. um but in terms of like Singapore, even in it's an Asian country, it still has a lot of like Asian traditions of like having an office and going to an office. But I think that's changing quite a bit. Even like a lot of co-working spaces started picking up because a lot of people have just got office like desk spaces instead of a whole packed out like office. I think it's going to be a hybrid model of like people working from home and some working from the office. But I definitely think the offices are going to get much smaller. It will just
Yeah,
make things a lot more efficient.
got it.
So that's the way things are here.
Okay. And I know you're a big guy in kind of lifelong learning, so I think the audience might benefit from kind of some of the things you're reading or maybe like listening to. But what's like a book or like podcast that you've been listening to that you think people could kind of benefit from, listening to, like that has had an impact on you?
I think there's a good podcast. I mean, like a good sales podcast. I've been listening to a lot. It's called I think I forgot the name of it. It's in the President Club,
Okay.
and it's around sales like strategies. Like that's from as little as like how to write emails properly, like um, the words to use and things you do in like sales meetings and how to like sell in the pandemic times. That's something I've been listening to quite a lot recently, and they always have new guests um, that come in and share their knowledge. Books wise, I do read quite a bit, but it's kind of been on the back burner. I'm not gonna lie. More recently, I've been actually like I used to read a lot of biographies and stuff. So the general Elon Musk, And I've read Elon Musk, Richard Branson, all the standard stuff you read. But more recently, I've been reading a lot of stuff around the history, like around the Tamil history, the war, like pre-war, like post-conflict. So I've been getting into a lot of that, and that's been quite interesting. Another podcast I've listened to from an entrepreneurship point of view is called Unsexy Business. I think I mentioned this one to you, and
Yes.
that's an English like podcast is about like very traditional businesses, how you don't have to have like buzzwords and like really sexy stuff to fundraise and make a good living. You can still have very traditional businesses that still make millions of dollars in revenue. So that's a good one. It's called Unsexy Business. Um, so those are a few things. And then more from a development point of view, as I mentioned, I did that LinkedIn course, which has been super, super helpful. Just like, because I guess a lot of people use LinkedIn as a social media platform, just here and there, post here and there, reach out. But I feel like having a structure and a goal in terms of what you want to get out of it and really using it for the right purpose, I think LinkedIn could be super, super powerful.
Oh, I agree with you. I've been telling people that LinkedIn is a super underrated platform. Everyone
Yeah.
is focusing on Facebook and Instagram and all these other platforms, but LinkedIn's like that. It's like that, forgotten cousin or something. Like I get so much value out of LinkedIn. So
Yeah. I think most of, if not, I think 80 to 90% of it, like leads and like business comes from there. It's
yeah.
crazy.
Um, what's a new belief, behavior, kind of habit you've developed over, say, the last couple of years that's really helped you?
I think it's more like a maturity thing. It's more like a lot of things I've been working on. Two things I've been really bad at for a long time is one, communicating like emotions. It's just because of like the household I grew up in and like the community, we're not great at talking about our emotions or sharing. And like growing up as a Tamil man, you're expected to be a certain way and like tough and hard and all of this stuff. That's been so struggle for a long time, but I'm getting so much better at like really expressing my feelings and like sharing things and not bottling things up to a point it just blows up. So that's something that I've gone much better at. And the second thing is it's probably communication, like really being honest about how I feel about a certain situation and really expressing it. That's something that I wasn't really good at because I was like a little bit afraid of like how that's going to impact the other person. So, not being too much of a people pleaser, but really being open about how I feel about things. And that's been super, super, super useful and it's getting better. And the third thing is just about saying no to things. I think it's one of the most powerful things. It's because like, whenever it could be for work, customers asking you for something, you come up with solutions and work around it. When a more social setting, you get invites to things or things people ask you. I'm sometimes afraid to say no because I don't want to kind of ruin that relationship, and I try and not to say no. But actually, just being very honest and saying no could actually be a very powerful thing, and it's really useful at work and in life.
Love it. Well, I'm glad you said yes to the podcast then. So that means you want to be here. What's been the impact of, since you kind of spent, I know most of your life was London, like your adult life, but
Yeah.
it seems like Singapore has been pretty impactful. So what's been the impact of the London slash Singapore Tamil community on you from like a business and personal point of view?
I think the London like the community is like it's great. There's a lot of like super smart, hardworking people, um, very supportive. More and more, the younger generation being like super supportive to each other. There's a lot of like groups on LinkedIn. There's a lot of groups on like Instagram. Whether that be from like a professional point of view or from the arts, like any industry you talk about, there's groups and organizations that really support each other. So that's something that had a very positive like impact on me. They were super supportive for me, but also like even in like the Canadians, I have a lot of Canadian friends that I'm connected via like Instagram or LinkedIn. Like we met up like when you came over, so that was always quite nice. Just connect with our like Tamils in other parts of the world as well.
For sure.
Singapore is slightly different, just because there's not as many Ulam Tamils here as compared to like Canada and the UK, but there's still a small, like community, and it's always nice when you bump into someone who's like, oh, like my parents from Jaffna too. I'm like, okay, that's quite nice. But generally, it's here it's slightly different, but also very supportive. Like a lot of my Tamil friends here, whenever whenever I need something or need help with, they generally come and offer their support. Um, from a like exposure point of view, like introductions. It's also about giving back as well. I'm always like keen to like, hey, like I'm happy. I don't want to always take. It's not the point. I'm happy to give back. So any opportunities I get to like contributing back to the Tamil community here, which I do, I'm always open to that. So I feel like the Tamil community here in London, Canada, very supportive, and I think that's something I would like to see more and more going forward, and continue to thrive and still hold on to our identity.
In terms of like your personal legacy, if you were to ask friends and family to describe you, or like how would you want to be remembered by your friends and family in a few sentences?
I think I think the impact is probably like super important to me. Like having impacted, like it could be like our community, it could be of wider community. Just having an impact and actually making a difference would probably be what I want to be remembered for. I might not be there just yet, just because I'm like working on ventures and stuff. But like you can still build businesses that impact people. You still need to have a base and a stability for you to be able to do other work. So I think for me, it's like someone who's had an impact on the community would probably be the way I want to be remembered.
Who is somebody that you would say in the global Tamil community that you admire, and why? And who's maybe one non-Tamil person that you admire?
I mean, that's tough. There's a lot of like
Yeah.
amazing people out there. Um, I there's just so many like amazing Tamil people around the world. It's a hard one to pinpoint. I think in the UK, for example, I would say like the founder of Labara,
Oh, Radisson. Yeah.
Radisson Anna is someone I admire a lot. I've met him on multiple occasions. He's just such an amazing human being, and also like from a business point of view, he's got that part really nailed. Like really came in with nothing and built like a multi-million pound like business and really contributed back to the community as well. And he's also very much about giving. I love listening to his like speeches on YouTube, and like when I met him, it's always been a positive experience. He's someone that I admire quite a lot. Um, I think like outside of that, I like of course like outside of our Tamil community is probably um, I really look up to people who really challenge the norm. So someone who's completely different to that is probably someone like Elon Musk, who really like I've read his like biographies, I've seen his like videos and stuff, and you see his work and like how he's really changing the world. I think that's something that I really admire. So Elon Musk probably be the next one.
Okay. And this podcast is called The Tamil Creator, and part of it is kind of sharing nuggets or information, or there's been a ton of it already, but what's just like a final piece of advice that you would give to aspiring, your aspiring Tamil kind of creators out there?
I I definitely think um, I think one piece of advice for me, I think I've been quite fortunate because my family and friends been very supportive of the whole journey. But people who feel like they're not being supported enough by their family or friends or the community, it's not to say, like our town community don't support each other, or they're not really supportive in what I'm in this creative aspect of things. I would say like just go out there and do it. Do what you aspire to do. Really take the step forward. I think actions obviously speak like obviously brings in actions obviously speak louder than words, so you've got to go and do it. And I think like someone like Kobe, for example, and one of the things he tells me all the time is like, when one Tamil person wins something or gets rewarded or does something amazing, it's a win for the whole community. And I think I share that value so much. It's like every time, a small thing that I can do is to win stuff or build something amazing or create an impact. And I'm doing that, and I share that with the rest of the Tamil community as well. To really have that thought in mind.
That's true. It's a great point. And that kind of concludes like the serious part of the discussion. I think there's going to be a ton of value there. Now to kind of move on to the fun portion of the interview, where what I call a game I call Would You Rather. Pretty basic or simple. I basically say two things, and you have to choose one, and you have to tell me why. Okay?
Okay.
We'll start with
Okay.
an easy one: mutton rolls or kotroti.
Oh, I have to choose one. I can't have both.
Yeah, you gotta choose one.
I think mutton rolls I can eat all day long, because any time of the day, whether it's like a lunchtime thing or like even after like a couple of drinks, like mutton rolls it's life.
Um, this is based on like the time I spent, I think, on the in London, and I got to kind of see you. But tea or coffee?
Uh, I think it's tea for me.
And why?
It's tea. It's just because you're so used to drinking so much tea from growing up, and
Got it.
especially like my mom's tea, it's like the best. So definitely tea for me.
What is your natural preferred state? With the shirt or shirtless?
Definitely shirtless.
I can tell from all those photos on Instagram. Uh,
Oh man,
Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk?
I think Elon Musk for me.
Still,
His
okay.
outrageous audacity is crazy.
UK or Singapore?
Oh God, that I can't. I think I would always love the UK. No matter where I go, it's like home for me. I
Got
can't give it up. But as much as I love the Singapore right now, but the UK will always be home.
it. Condo or house?
Oh, I think a house. Just because I've always grown up in a house, even back home and in the UK. Just so used to that. But also, like condo does have its like perks, pools, tennis courts, and all the amenities that come with it. But a house is always nice. You feel so grounded. It's just easy.
Okay. The last question, and I know you like to travel. I don't know if I made this hard enough for you. Bali or Italy?
Oh, Bali any day. I mean, I love Italy. I've been there 3, 4 times, but I think Bali is just magical. And there's so much to do. Food's great, super cheap, easy to like get around. Bali
Yeah.
is like, I would live there if I can.
I've been to both places as well, and I would say Bali. I mean, Italy, I think is great, but yeah, I think that like Bali, there's something magical about it. I don't know
Yeah,
how to describe it, but there's something magical. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, that kind of concludes the podcast. I mean, I think there's so much interesting stuff you kind of talked about. I think just your journey was inspiring, kind of all the nuggets of information you shared about Boxaroo. Like I said, like you would have never, I think if you never had industry knowledge, you would have never thought that's kind of a viable business. And you kind of taken something that used to be very hard and made it easy. So I think people are going to be really kind of interested and intrigued. If people want to connect with you, whether it's to kind of pick your brain to get advice or just maybe there's a business or partnership opportunity, what's the best way for them to get connected with you?
I think the easiest way is LinkedIn. LinkedIn's the most receptive and easiest way. Um, or like you can, or Instagram's good too. Instagram or LinkedIn are easiest way. Just drop me a message, and more than happy to have a chat.
I'll put Rob, for those of you listening, I'll put Robert's those links to Robert's profiles in the show notes. Perfect. Yeah. And just to kind of, wrap things up, For any of you listening, please give this podcast a 5 out of 5. It really helps increase the visibility on whatever platform you're listening to, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts. And if you can comment, share it, like our stuff on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter, that'd be great. And if you have any feedback or ideas on future guests or even topics, feel free to reach out to me at hello@thetalmudcreator.com. Thank you, Robert, for kind of hopping on, and thank you for everyone for listening. Look forward to the next episode.
Thanks. Thank you so much for having me. So much fun.